First, uh, I guess, who are we? When did we meet? How did we meet? Um, uh, why are we both interested in doing a podcast? Um, and we have no idea where this is going, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so we are just doing it. Okay, so when did we meet?
I would guess
2010,
around 2010. Was that when you entered St. Philip's?
11, I think. Well, I knew you before I entered, right? Or no? Like, did I
Just
meet you?
through like Father Call meet and
Yeah,
greet things. I think we had met.
yeah. So, probably 2011 September. That's when I entered. Uh, and since then, um, we've been friends. We chat a lot. I guess intellectual stuff. We both enjoy philosophy,
Yeah.
psychology, uh, everything really.
Maybe a
uh,
little more skeptical about theology, but we also chat about that.
yep. uh, where, where are you on the intellectual? I don't know. Are you an idealist, practical? Um,
Oh, I'm definitely more of an idealist.
I think so. Uh,
You're probably more practical, eh? Do you think?
uh,
I never thought about that
I
spectrum.
I think so. Like, I usually when I'm thinking about it, it's like, okay, what are the practical implications of this or that?
Hmm.
Um, um, yeah. Um, what else? Why podcast?
Well, I think we've been having interesting discussions that have really pushed both of us intellectually,
Hmm.
and we've learned and grown from it. And so I guess our hope is that if someone else listens in and um, thinks along with us, that they might
Hmm.
also learn something and grow as well.
Yeah, yeah, same here, I think. When I first thought about it, like I even I've thought about writing before. Not that like my writing is great, but um, just like blogging and things like that. Um, and the problem I always encounter is like there's so much out there. Why
Mm.
add more junk? uh, and the thing is, I actually find that sometimes what we talk about is really interesting, um,
Yeah, same.
because most most conversations every day they don't go into such details, and we have, how can I say, like we are opposed enough to have some interesting battles, let's
Mm.
say, like
Yeah.
because we don't agree on everything, like religion, for example, especially now. Uh, so I
What
really
does
enjoy that.
especially now mean, Zaid?
Well, maybe that's a whole podcast.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yes. So yeah, this is where we are. We still haven't decided a name. Uh, there was one
I was
idea, but
leaks of faith.
yeah. I don't know. What do you think about names? Maybe that's off record or.
I mean, I think if people listen, if people want to hear us, then it's very much process oriented. So it can
Hmm.
be along the process of finding out the name too.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that.
But yeah, we
What?
can think about it more. I was thinking something like as simple as conversations.
Yeah, that's yeah, something simple. I
Just,
like simples.
but we can
Uh,
think about it more.
yeah.
So what?
Uh, just
Uh,
one thing
yeah, for sure.
is that just the realization that this is going like once we put it online, that's it. It's online. Um,
Yeah,
so maybe we should just be um, extra careful with names of family or friends, connections, anything. Like uh, I'm sure I'm gonna slip something in there, but um, just to be careful because you never know who's listening, right?
that's right. No, that sounds. A good caution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, floor is yours.
All right. Do you think we should start by talking a little bit more about our background?
Sure, go ahead.
So, I guess both of us spent time in the seminary. We studied philosophy, theology, and then I left first. It was something of a crisis of existence rather than a crisis of faith. And then pretty shortly after Zaid left, maybe about a year later, and I think that's what kind of brought us together more was figuring life out post seminary. And then Zaid entered a psychology program, and I followed suit shortly after. And meanwhile, Zaid was in the throes of a courtship where he was discerning marriage, ended up getting married, and I was kind of in the same city, so I got to see his working that out. And then, yeah, we both practice as therapists now, and that we bring some of our philosophical and theological ideas to our work implicitly rather than explicitly. But and then we both read widely. We both read different things from each other, and that also creates good dialogue, good discussion. And I think we have some similarities in thought. Like you pointed out the differences, which create the dynamism and create the battle. But there's some similarities too in terms of what we tend to think about, and that I think creates the dialogue too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about what might be a good starting point for us to talk about. But
What's going on these days in your life, like intellectually? What are you reading?
I'm working through the introductory psychoanalytic lectures, Freud.
Freud. Okay.
Right, yeah.
I read the Jung one, the Introduction to Psychoanalysis.
That's on my list. How should we start there?
Yeah, let's do it. So first of all, who would you say is your biggest influences, like in thought, people or um, thinkers or movements? Like, what would be your, if you can put a label on it? Of course, it's hard to put a label on things, but
Yeah.
which school of thought would you belong to? Let's say.
I think I'd say I'm most influenced by sort of postmodern thought. I'm trying to think though who explicitly, like I think with some of the modernists, so someone like Kierkegaard or even Aquinas and all those thinkers have influenced my thought for sure. But I think some of the postmodern terms like Foucault and in psychology like narrative psychology, these things influence my thought. You're an INFJ, I'm an INFP, so I tend to just skim and read and think, and I have a hard time coming to firm conclusions. So I'm widely influenced, I would say. Who would you say are kind of the big influences in your life?
Well, you remember, like in seminary, we did classical philosophy, Plato,
Yeah.
Aristotle, and all that, Socrates, and medieval ones as well. And that was my whole thinking. And then later on, when I was introduced to Hegel, Kant, Foucault, Freud, they totally changed the game, especially Hegel, the philosophy of history. That was a huge, huge shift because it just like I think I used to think linearly, like in a linear way, cause effect and all that, and with Hegel it just totally blew that. It became different. Later on, systems theories that was a huge influence on me. Um, um, like especially in biology. So I also have a bit of background in science. That was the first thing I studied. Um, and first, I did not appreciate it. It was nothing. Like I took a lot of science courses, like neuroscience, psychology, and all that, but I didn't like it at all. Um, I thought it was very um, reductionist, basically, like just trying to figure out human psychology through studying rats and monkeys. That didn't make sense. Um, but later on, after studying philosophy, I appreciated biology much more, actually. Um, Another big influence is Darwinism on me,
Mm.
which is comes from Hegel, of course. Uh, I because of Darwinism, especially like I learned it through Richard Dawkins. Um, I started to think like to see the developments and evolution in every system. So
Mhm.
Darwinism mixed with systems theory, uh, and and psychology, like psychoanalysis and all that, it made me realize that in a sense there's a function to everything, uh,
Mhm.
like like to our emotions, to the way we eat, the our energy, and just start to look at the body, for example, as a system, society as a system, family as a system. So uh, the unconscious and the conscious mind, they have a purpose, and things like that. So I would say if you can put one label on my thought, it would be systems thinking plus how do you say that, pragmatic,
Pragmatism.
like pragmatism, like William James in psychology, for example.
Mhm.
uh, and yeah, I like to take from everything and see how it fits this whole universe, because the more layers, kind of like Jordan Peterson, like the more layers of analysis you have, uh, the more you would learn about something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I think I think if I had to label, I like how you just put a label on it. I think I would lean towards something, um, maybe something more like Rogers, or but at the same time I'm very familiar with, and I bring that lens too as well of like act and pragmatism
Hmm.
and systems. I find systems fascinating, the study of
Oh yeah.
systems and trying to understand how it influences us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you want to understand something more comprehensively, systems is not perfectly, of course. You can't understand something perfectly, but systems is definitely the way to go. Um, and also, like, um, how can I say, like, there's a lot that you don't know. Like, there's a lot we can't know, and because of that realization, like you remember in my early days, I used to like Aquinas a lot and
Yeah.
the classicals, and I was like so passionate about it. And it's like he's the truth or something. But uh, later on, I realized that there was more of like almost psychological reasons why I in a sense, like the Aquinas so much. It's very clear, gives me very, uh, um, it basically, it's a system that gives you answers for everything. Uh, and of course, we are not very comfortable with not having answers. We would rather have an answer than to be in the unknown. Um, and there's always unknown. There's always something we don't know. It's just because we are human.
Yeah.
Uh, and for me, the more um, I learn from different angles, the better. It sheds light, basically. But I would say both of us, um, we don't settle now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly trying to push the boundary of what we know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are things that I take and I do in my life and my practice and all of this, but it's like uh, it's still in test mode. Like,
Yeah.
let's see if this works in a sense. And some things I'm more convinced that they work than others, but uh, I would say in general, um, yeah, in general, nothing 100%, let's say. Good old
Good
me.
and good enough is always
Good enough. Yeah, 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 yeah.
for
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
The the idea of a system or a philosophy being more about our needs, like just to kind of throw out philosophers and start that conversation a little bit. But Nietzsche talks about every philosophy is also an autobiography, right? It's also
Mm-hmm.
the author is coming up with their own psychological defenses and their own psychological way of grounding themselves in the world.
Oh yeah, definitely. Uh, I I was actually I listen to books. I don't read. Uh, and I was listening to William James, his
Mm,
lectures on Introduction to Pragmatic Philosophy or something like that. Introduction to that. And he was showing how throughout history, like you look at people like Hume and Locke and Leibniz and all of these, and he's showing how their philosophies is influenced by temperament.
mm,
It's not really some sort of truth right there, and they are arguing for it. And when when you think in systems terms, um, maybe it's you too, but like especially for me, I'm always going beneath like to see what's going on there. It's not like uh, just argue the rationality of something. Like I I I really think now that and I understand that like most of our rationality is influenced by emotions. So, for example, if emotions or beliefs or whatever it is, so if someone think about political system, for example. Think about the coronavirus now. Actually, like the policies around it. Some people would say the economy is more important. Other people would say saving lives. Some people would give you a whole argument about how no, we should be staying at home and shut down everything, no matter what happens, to save life.
mm-hmm.
Other people would say no, things have to keep going. We just have to adapt and be careful and things like that. And in all of these um, different opinions, let's say everyone is giving a thesis and they can write an essay about which one is the true and right um, action.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that they are really arguing to defend some sort of belief or value embedded in them. So it's not a matter of you know what I mean.
I do. Yeah.
Um,
Like
and
the importance we're pitting these sort of strange things against each other. It's the importance of the economy versus the importance of human life,
yeah,
right?
but
And they're they're not actually in contrast with each other.
yeah, you can't
But then we
separate the
yeah,
two.
exactly.
Like to live, you need to eat, and basically to put it in the simplest terms, right? And to eat, you need economy. It's I mean, unless you are a farmer or something in the middle of nowhere and you can sustain yourself, but that's different. But most for most people, the economy is living as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe some people have this idea that the economy means stock market and corporations and all that. But at the end of the day, the stock market and corporations are made of people. It's not like it's some sort of entity in the sky. Um,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Uh, So I like to look at things, like to look at the underground of things instead of just the surface and argue. Now, at least, I used to argue a lot. Yeah.
I think we both. I think I've always liked to argue, but I think we both were pretty entrenched in the sort of classical way of looking at the world,
Hmm.
and have progressed to seeing it a bit more complexly.
Yeah.
And
And yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, and maybe for slightly different reasons. But go ahead. Yeah.
The other thing is there were for me the way I look at it, there were some psychological reasons for me being, as I said, entrenched in the classical way. It just the sense you get of, wow, I know the truth now, or uh, I have common sense, which apparently is not that common. But and even now, like you hear about these conspiracy theories about the
Mm.
coronavirus being caused by this and that, and sure, some of them might be true, some of them might be absolutely BS. uh, but the way I look at them, like I still look at the try to look at the evidence, but the way I look at them is like, what are the conditions that will make such a thing happen? Like the idea that a group of people control the whole world through this fear tactics and things like that. Uh, it's just like, first of all, you need uh, someone who doesn't change their mind for like years to plan this whole thing.
Mm.
uh, you need such an amazing unity among these group, and uh,
Cabal.
yeah, and if their values are so messed up, it's very hard to bring such a group together. Uh, so that's one thing. That just looking at the conditions of it. But conditions aside, what is it, this conspiracy idea, what is it giving people that they are investigating it, and all of this? I think people are in uncertain times. They have no idea what's going on. They are worried about the future, and they are trying to find some causes.
Mm.
And we are wired, in a sense, emotionally to to find the causes. If you are in the middle of a jungle and you hear sounds, guess what? You're gonna want to see where is this sound coming. Because if you just walk and walk and walk, guess you're gonna be someone's meal,
Yeah.
uh, right? So we are really wired to find causes and to rest and not be overtired. These conspiracy theories give you that cause. It's like, yeah, yeah, there's a group of people that are trying to control you and all of this. And uh, again, maybe it's true, maybe not, but I'm always suspicious. Like it's the probabilities are very high.
Just to add even another kind of perspective, it's all Girardian, where the third is kind of scapegoated, right? If someone
Yeah,
deliberately planted it, it allows the unity of the Western world to kind of say, well, we're okay, we're good. It's that person's problem. It's that person's fault, and then you scapegoat, right?
yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
yes, we're looking for causes because that gives us some control over the situation,
yeah,
and it's also kind of externalizing the fault.
exactly.
It's China's fault. That's the
Yeah,
psychological movement.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so that, by the way, how is your connection? Is it cutting a bit?
I hear you and see you fine. I haven't.
Okay.
Are you having
Yours
some issues?
is cutting a bit.
Oh shoot!
Yeah. It's just a little, like I can still understand what's going on, but
There's 5 bars, but
okay. Uh, yeah. So, um, what are some of? Sorry, go.
no, I was going to ask about the Jung book that you've been
Yeah.
listening to.
Yes. Uh, so In a sense, Jung is very practical if you think about it. I used to think that he's all over the place. Um, he just talks and talks and talks and talks, reflects and talks. But he's actually very practical. Like, if you think about it, one of his biggest ideas, at least how I understand him, maybe I'm wrong, um, that and this might be his also his different how he's different from Freud. Um, let's say you were abused as that's quite the shift by the way in topic. But anyway, let's say you were abused as a child, or let's say you went through war as a child, or something like that. Um, and right now we are 40 years old, let's say, and all these things are coming back to you. Um, uh, but throughout the years, since you were 18 or something, nothing of that. You've repressed it all, and now it's all coming back to you. The reason why it's coming back to you is not because um, of something in the past that happened. It's because you're just hitting a wall right now, a challenge in your life. So um, let's say um, your the way you adapted to the abuse or the war when you were a kid is by um, um, avoiding it, like not thinking about it and all of that.
Mm.
And there's something good about avoidance. Not all avoidance is bad. Just like anything in life, there's something good in everything.
Yeah.
And let's say all these years you've been focusing very well on your conscious mind, your career or whatever it is, and you're a great scientist, let's say. Uh, it, if you are a great scientist, it's good to actually take away all the emotions because you want to be objective in all of this. And right now, you have some sort of challenge in your life where you cannot just avoid anymore. That's where all the things from the past hit you. Uh, it's not it's not because things happened in the past that are coming out now. It's because you've hit something in the moment that the past is no longer being able to adapt to it.
Ah.
Yeah, which is great because again, I used to think, beginning of my studies in psychology and all that, that solution focus and all of these things are solution focus or short-term therapy are kind of um, not deep enough. They
Mm.
don't go back to the causes, and and on the other hand, psychodynamic is deep, and you have to go dig deep to do something in a person's life. Uh,
Mm.
but now I see why you don't need to always go back. If you can help someone to go beyond their current challenge,
Mm.
they don't need to go to back. Uh, and the other thing is, um, there's some sort of negative connotation with like um, uh, just the defense mechanisms. They are seen as a negative thing most of the time, unless
Mm.
it's um, unless it's like humor, for example. It's not seen as a very negative thing. But um, I I'm seeing them now more as all of them can be negative or positive. It's just where are you putting it, uh, like in what context in your life, and because suppression can be good sometimes. I mean,
Yeah. Fair
uh,
enough.
not in the maybe not in the long term, but if you are a child, you better suppress because what do you know about the world? Like it's gonna um, be too overwhelming. I guess that's the purpose of suppression. But
Mm.
yeah, so that's the biggest point I took from Jung's book. The other one is, of course, he expands the libido idea. So for Freud, it's more of a sexual, creative, reproductive force. For Jung, it's way beyond that.
Mm.
Um, Life itself, or ultimately God, he would say, is libido in a sense, but that's too complicated. We can spend, or maybe we can talk about it now. I don't know. But uh, um, like for Freud, it was just a sexual force.
Yeah.
For Jung, it's life force itself, and life force can express itself through sexuality sometimes. When, yeah,
I think you're kind of getting to the heart of the difference between Freud and Jung. I know that a lot of kind of neo-Freudians would suggest that the libido and the kind of sexual powers that Freud talked about are broader than sort of genital force, right?
hmm hmm
The difference, though, I think, is that Jung kind of talks about it in a more spiritual sense, whereas for
oh yeah,
Freud, it's purely a biological impulse.
yeah, yeah. I think for Freud it was purely as a biological impulse, uh, or
He was a materialist, right? Whereas
yeah,
Jung, there's a spiritual element
exactly.
preserved.
Um, and I mean the whole idea of the unconscious mind and the sorry, I mean the collective unconscious mind. That's a huge difference between Freud and Jung. Uh, there is now a field of um, like just in biology in general to show you how things are passed onto you for many generations. Like the way you it can be like through temperament and things like that, but like the way you react to events like anger, passivity, or
Mm.
things like that. Um, and in a sense, I forgot who said that. It's one of the uh, evolution in neuroscience books that I've read. Um, but in a sense, if you think about it, um, uh, to reproduce, you need some sort of historian in you to
Mm.
tell you how to reproduce because your cells are just fresh, full potential stem cells, basically.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they are not differentiated, uh, right? And so you need some sort of system within you uh, to remember how to make parts, to remember how to make a kidney, to remember
Mm.
how, you know what I mean, how to make a brain. And that system in you is basically like a brain to 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 show your body how to evolve, how to develop, and think about the collective unconscious mind as some sort of that brain on an emotional or behavioral level.
Mm.
It it's like an organ within you to show you how to behave and interact in the world. It has like a toolbox of different personalities, which a personality you need at this time,
Mm.
uh, which modes of behavior and things like that. And this is how I come to look at it now.
Is it not in some ways parallel though? Sense of
Sorry, Bradley.
is it not parallel in some ways to the superego?
In a sense, yes. I think the superego and the ego are more limited in time,
Mm.
where your ego is what develops when you're born and above that.
Yeah.
Uh, and the superego is the, let's say, the ego's interaction with authority and culture and all of that. So, but the collective, uh, and Jung would say that like the ego and the superego are still there. It's kind of mine, but
Yeah.
the uncollective. Uh, so the uncollective unconscious mind, the collective unconscious mind is contains in it the idea of I of ego development, um,
Mm.
right? And all of it's kind of difficult to explain, but you know how if you know object-oriented programming, it's it's kind of it's kind of easier to use that language. That's why, for another reason, why I'm interested in psychotherapy as an engineering field than as a medical health
Mm.
field. But that's another topic. Um, but in object oriented uh, languages or programming, the way it works is you you have um, let's say a function uh, and objects, different objects. So uh, let's say a function could be uh, uh, replicate. Okay, let's say there's
Yeah.
a function, you put x and it replicates x. Okay, uh, uh, and there are many different objects. So uh, think about users, Facebook users as objects, right? So there's the Bradley user and there's the Zaid user and all that. And once you put Zaid in the function, it replicates. Once you put Bradley in the function, it replicates. Um, and um, that's a very simplistic way to say it, but uh, basically the the unconscious collective mind um, has these sorts of functions like the archetypes. So there's the hero, there's this and that, but they need egos to.
Mm.
So you need an ego, and you need the hero archetype. You join them together to come up with a person,
Mm.
and that ego contains many different things. The environment they were grown up in, the different parents' dynamic they've experienced, different temperaments, different many billion things, and that's why no hero looks the same. Hence the title, "A Hero with a Thousand Faces," Joseph Campbell. Uh,
Mm.
so that's Jung's idea of the collective unconscious mind. For Freud, he just stopped at the ego stage. Uh,
Yes.
he didn't go beyond that.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Can we go back just briefly to the sort of solution focus versus psychodynamic
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dichotomy? I think part of it too, though, is kind of what are you hoping to obtain from therapy, right? If you're purely trying to get rid of symptoms, purely trying to get rid of whatever suffering brought you to therapy in the first place, then I think there can be a lot of value in sort of purely pragmatic work. Whereas I think the more psychodynamic depth psychology, it can help with symptoms, but I think it also leads to greater self-awareness, self-knowledge. And I mean, you're going to spend the rest of your life with yourself. It's probably worthwhile getting to know yourself. I think
Mm-hmm.
the tools that those theories and those ways of doing therapy offer are for that in a way that solution focus doesn't achieve. Would you agree? Would you kind of see it
Yes,
that way?
I totally agree. Um, I think, uh, and maybe this is why these two things developed. So
Mm,
Freud and Jung, they were really developing a science of
yeah, yeah.
of the mind, um, a way to look comprehensively on how the mind work and the psyche and all of this. Later on, the developments in like short term and solution focus and all that, they were not developing a science. They were developing a method or a technique to deal with challenges that psychotherapists have. So, you know, like the kind of clients we get. Some clients are coming to totally transform their life, change everything, talk about everything, and all of this. Other clients, they have something bothering them. They just looking for some tool to get done with it and leave. Like they are not looking into changing their life or transforming their life and all of that. So you have one sessions clients and then you have 10 plus sessions clients. I ultimately, I don't necessarily see that every client would need to go through a lot of deep work. Um, I mean, I have a lot of one session clients through work, just like short term stuff. Um, the way I focus on it is like, um, look at the stage, where are they? What's one thing they need to just make them jump uh, uh, and maybe grow or develop?
Mm.
One realization, one concept, maybe one uh, way to change things. It could be as simple as learning how to look into someone else's perspective instead of
Mm.
being enmeshed in their own perspective. That's a huge development step that a lot of people suffer immensely just because they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and yeah, I mean, it might seem like a battle between these two things, the short term and the long term. Uh, but if you do the systems analysis, uh, they fit in the system. Uh,
And and I think like even psychodynamic, where you're insight oriented, you're trying to come to some insight that shifts things for the person. That
mhm.
is ideally is happening in every session, right? So you're still getting a takeaway. You're still having a pragmatic outcome.
Of course. Yeah,
So I think that's how they can really fit together.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, of course, of course. I mean, another thing you can do, and I do that all the time, is as a psychotherapist, I am using psychoanalysis in all of this, but
Yeah.
I don't need to communicate it to the client.
Right.
So, um, one of the things that you have to do all the time is like to see like transference and countertransference. It's like what is happening in the session? How is the client influencing me? How am I influencing the client? Uh, and that all goes in my head. It doesn't have to be communicated
Communicated. Yeah.
with the client. Maybe on an unconscious level it does, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Uh, yeah, that's where are you on that? Like short term versus uh,
I think probably very similar to you in that with some clients, I am doing short-term work because that's all that they really want, or that's all that they
mhm,
really are looking for. Um, but I feel a great privilege when it becomes ongoing, when it's less about symptom management, it's more about kind of greater self-awareness, right?
mhm.
And I find too that one of the great things about the work is that it changes you too, right? You
Oh
become
yeah,
more self-aware as you help others become self-aware.
yeah. I'm I get a lot of insights just from sessions.
Yeah.
Um, um a lot of accountability from sessions too.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, like um, a lot of times, like on a day-to-day basis, it's like I encounter some problem or something like that, and it's like, okay, what would I tell my client? Or I've told my client before something like this. Now I'm encountering this problem, so what am
Mm.
I going to do? And things like that. Yeah, um, it's an amazing um, job. It's very draining. It
Yeah.
could be very draining, I would say, because most of the time it's not. But uh, overall, um, for someone who enjoys to listen to people's stories, enjoys helping people, interested in just thinking about what it means to be human,
Mm.
uh, it's a great uh, thing. I'm very fortunate, I guess.
Yeah. I would say the same.
Hmm.
I I don't want to I don't know how long we're gonna let these things run, but
Yeah,
I'm so I'm
3 hours,
so curious
Joe
about
Rogan
no
style.
no I can't do that. I don't have the stamina. But I'm really curious about the religion question that came up very briefly earlier.
Yeah, maybe that's better with another.
Oh, save it for a whole.
Yeah,
So stick to the therapy, eh? Psychology.
we don't have to stick to that, but I mean, I think that question might need 2 hours
That's true. That's true.
because we have to look at the development and things. And I'm also interested of where you are now
Oh, I see.
because we haven't talked about it for a long time.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's right. Let's save it. In future discussions. So back to you and back to the work that we're doing, I guess. Do you what do you think of the longer term work?
Uh, there are things that I thought before when I first started. I thought that they would take sessions and sessions,
Mm.
but now uh, they they can take one session really. Um, a lot of the things I'm focusing on, and that goes into relationships and my own personal relationship and all of that, is beliefs. Uh,
Mm.
like um, here's the thing: if I always give this example to my client. It's like, let's say I have this deep down belief that you should give me $10,000 right now, and 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 when I say I really believe this is like it's like a core belief, I might not even be conscious of it, right?
Mm.
Uh, you have to give me 10,000, or let's say I need 10,000 from you, and I come to you and say, hey, Bradley, give me this $10,000. You have to give me. And of course, you're like, what the heck are you talking about, right? Uh, then immediately I I will start to get angry at you, angry at the world, angry at myself, start to be depressed about it, start to think that you are not trustworthy, uh, maybe I'm a failure, I don't know how to get this 10,000 from Bradley, uh, and all sort of things, right? Like, and we kind of we are built in a way, evolved in a way to protect the beliefs.
Yeah.
We never almost question our beliefs. Like with all these reactions, um, most likely I would not question. Like, oh, wait a minute, should I ask Bradley for 10,000? It's just it's a given that this belief is true, and I have to go get it,
Mm.
right? Um, and the reason for such a mechanism in evolution is because beliefs are there to help you survive,
Yeah.
basically. Uh, and they are not something to take lightly. Uh, like to change your beliefs is to change yourself. basically. And one of the things I work with clients many times is like in one session, it's like look at the beliefs. How did you learn this belief? Shift the focus. So it's no longer why am I getting angry or what are the triggers of anger and things like that. It's like what's the belief there that's making you get angry? So if again, if my belief is that I have to get $10,000 from Bradley, well, we can talk about how Bradley feels and how I feel and what's the trigger and maybe do some communication lessons on how to ask him in a nice way, blah, blah, blah. But most of the time we ignore that belief where it came from. Imagine if I have this belief that success in my career means I have to get paid high salary, or success in life means I have to have a Lamborghini in my garage. Uh, and people have these beliefs unconsciously, of course, not as simple as a Lamborghini, but status or power or money,
Mm.
and um, we never question them. They are just there.
Yeah.
And the reason why we don't question them is the same, is the practical reason of why we have them in the first place. Why do we have faith in the first place? And from an evolution perspective, if you think about it, um, if let's say your grandmother taught you a recipe of how to make lentil soup or
Mm.
something like that, and tells you like you first have to put it in, first boil the water for 5 minutes, and then add um, the lentils for 2 minutes exactly, not 1 minute and 40 seconds, but it has to be 2 minutes, and then put a sprinkle of whatever salt or something like that.
Pretty.
Well, yeah, if you don't, uh, I definitely don't know how to make lentil soup. But anyway, if you don't uh, follow that to exactly, there is a risk involved. If you follow it exactly, whether it's it's necessary or not, doesn't matter. Your grandmother had been doing it for this many years. She's 60 something, she's alive. So it's the safest thing to do to just follow to the letter, right? But if you say that no, maybe I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna try to um, I don't know, boil the water for 4 minutes only, even though boiling for 4 or 5 doesn't matter. But I'm gonna do it for 4 minutes instead of 5. There's a risk involved. Maybe, of course, your grandmother is not a scientist, but maybe you will die somehow because of the 4 minutes, because
The enzymes aren't
yeah, and
properly.
of course, throughout history, there were different reasons. Now we say enzymes and all that, but other times it's like
That's right.
the devil will come to you or something like that. Um, and that's the point of beliefs. And people did not take them lightly because it's not good to take beliefs lightly. You needed to go through rituals and and through stages to change your beliefs. It had to be like almost a community thing. Okay, so
Well, but to so but you're suggesting that in one session you're going to change these very defended, very important, very vulnerable beliefs. I'm saying, how do you go about doing that? Like, I think framing it as an experiment and even the insight of that idea are powerful tools of change. But
mhm.
I'm just thinking about my own work, and sometimes that belief is rightfully protected, and
Mhm.
just offering the insight, offering like let's try and experiment with it, isn't enough, and you need that reworking over time to kind of shift that.
Yeah. So for me, the and that's my personal opinion. There are people would disagree with that. the most important work in psychotherapy is understanding, to give the person understanding about how humans work, how they work in their life, and all of this. That comes above everything. Uh, it's more important than changing symptoms, more important than getting rid of things, um, more important than changing beliefs and all of that. Um, I think the reason why I put so much emphasis on understanding is because it gives choice at the end of the day.
Mm.
Uh, if if you if you understand the system, you will be able to make a choice. Uh, so
Sometimes.
uh, at least a choice of acceptance,
Right.
right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
There's always a choice in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can like
You can accept it or you can resist it.
yeah, yeah. Um, at least like worst case scenario is you can't do anything action wise, but you can accept it. You
Mhm.
can be at peace with it.
Mhm.
Um, there are ways to change uh, beliefs too, but they should not be taken lightly because here's why I say that is maybe the addiction you have, the anger you have, the symptoms you have are actually good for you. Um, when you take something from someone, like an addiction or anger or all of that, you leave them with nothing after, uh, and that's a dangerous place to be in a vacuum.
Mm.
Um, so understanding comes first. I think for people to understand where their anger is coming from or how do they become angry and things like that is much more important than getting rid of the anger. Um, and a lot of times, just knowing that is enough to
Yeah.
shift the focus. So let's say again, I'm angry at you because you did not give me my $10,000. And I go to a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist and tell him about all this anger. And um, and if the psychiatrist or psychotherapist tells me, um, what's the underlying belief? It's like, okay, Bradley has to give me my $10,000. How did you come up with this belief? How did it form in you? Where did you learn it?
Mm.
Is the focus in me instead of now focusing on Bradley is not giving me my 10,000. I'm focusing more on a more fundamental thing, and I'm shifting my consciousness in a sense. I'm going deeper. I'm
Yeah.
understanding myself, right? And once I understand this, oh wow, yeah, I have this belief because I don't know. My parents always told me Bradley has to give me $10,000. Or this is a silly example, but you can make true beliefs about it. Like I have to go to college, or um, I shouldn't fail any exam, or if I get a GPA less than 4.0, then I'm a failure. All
Mm.
sorts of beliefs, right? Or
Yeah.
I have to drive a Mercedes or BMW or something like that. I don't know. Um, uh, if I learn where they are coming from, then suddenly I'm opening a huge window in my life just because from that understanding, and it's like it's a call to examine everything else. To It's like, okay, well, that's one thing. What else do I believe, and where did these beliefs come from? And suddenly Bradley not paying me $10,000 is not a big deal anymore.
Mm.
It's like I started the engine going of wanting to examine myself.
And I know understanding is kind of the key there, right? But I think it shifts this. It can shift the symptom too, right? If it's a
Oh yeah,
story, it's a story I tell myself, and a belief in a way is a story, right? It's a
Yeah,
powerful story. It's a story
yeah,
that maintains our identity. But if we realize it's a story, it's harder to be angry about it than if it's the truth, if it's the way it is, right?
exactly, exactly. And there's another thing, like people don't make uh, um, a distinction between causes and purposes. So let's say thirst.
Mm.
Um, People um, get thirsty. The cause is, of course, dehydration, and the body sends you this message of thirst. Um, and when you feel thirsty, it comes to your consciousness, and um, you've learned long time ago, since childhood, when you're thirsty, you drink water or juice or whatever. Um, so when you feel the thirst, you go and get water, drink it, and the thirst goes away. So the cause of thirst is dehydration, but the purpose of thirst is to go and get water. So the
Yes.
cause of anger is the belief. Uh, the cause of anger is the belief, let's say, and the purpose of it is to for satisfaction, for uh, uh,
To set
drawing
appropriate
boundaries,
boundaries. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So to tell someone you should not get angry, you are building a wall between them and you. You are telling them, uh, don't defend yourself, for example, uh, and things like that. Now, of course, we have to be careful here because um, it's like, what about abuse and things like that? Uh, but again, when someone comes with an anger issue or addiction or whatever it is, it's not the anger or the addiction or whatever it is we are after. That's the when someone comes and says, um, "I'm, um let's say, I'm addicted to drinking water." It's not the let's make a plan or something like that to make you drink less. It's
Mm.
like what's going on that's making you want to drink water all the time. The focus, the belief, uh, maybe there's some sort of belief that if I don't drink water every 1 hour or something, then I'm gonna die. I don't know. Well, I think the example failed, but
There's no.
that's what I mean.
I think it works. The study with the two different rat populations where
Hmm.
in the one the cage was bare except for water and water
Hmm.
laced with heroin and their food, right? And in that cage the rats tended to the heroin water, right? And then in the other cage they had toys, they had spinning wheels and all those things that rats love and different
Hmm.
interactive things, and they had the same heroin water and plain water, and the rats didn't drink the heroin
Hmm.
water
Yeah,
because like our psyche needs so many different emotional pieces in place, and if we
yeah,
don't, we fill it in with a defense like addiction or um,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that brings us into another topic, and that's a whole other topic. It's like uh, gambling or alcohol
Mm.
or things like that. Do they make us addicted, or somehow we unconsciously decide to be addicted by them?
Yeah,
That's a
that
whole
that could be a whole
thing.
nother podcast,
Yeah,
addiction.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um so reading any Fowler these days. I know that's for a different podcast, but
Fowler? No, I haven't read Fowler for a long time. He's dead, I think. Died in when did he die? 2014, maybe? I'm not sure
mm,
actually.
Oh, I know what I was going to add. It's just the
Yeah.
idea of defenses, right? I know,
Mhm.
like you're saying that these defenses, like addiction or anger that's kind of unhealthily expressed, are important in a way. The whole idea of Freud, or one of the ideas of Freud, is the idea of mature defenses versus a less mature defenses or
Mhm.
pathological defenses, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about understanding, I what you're talking about is the development of what Freud would call a defense of intellectualization,
Mhm.
and so it's sublimating the anger or the addiction into a healthier defense of understanding.
Yeah.
It's not to say that understanding somehow fixes the problem. The problem is just being human and the
Exactly.
foibles of that. But it's how do we grapple with that reality?
Yeah. Um, and just to explain what's intellectualization, um, think about, for example, um, the eugenics movement. Um,
Mm,
uh, the reason behind it was to make a perfect race, or to so that no one suffers anymore, blah blah blah, to make a perfect human. Uh, Deep down, um, there's the belief that there needs to be a perfect human, uh,
mm,
uh, uh, and right now there are no perfect humans, and there's some sort of anger maybe
mm,
towards that. So deep down, it could be um, feeling some sort of failure, imperfection, and you forget all these feelings and start to intellectualize it to turn it into like a nice project that's good for humanity or something like that.
mm,
Um, and it's very interesting to see it in public these days as well. Like, I don't want to mention any names maybe now, but like you see it in activists, some activists, for example.
mm.
Uh, it's like it's all done in the name of this and that, but deep down you look at assumptions there and presumptions, and you see how there's a lot of anger involved, a lot of
Often
hate, and
often a lot of fear too, though.
of
Fear
course,
is the big driver, yeah.
of course, of course, yeah. Um, and this is what intellectualization is. Uh, uh, Another point from Freud actually about regression.
Mm,
Regression always happens when you hit a wall, too.
mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. In life.
Maybe this is just a brief commentary, but I think the COVID, right? The virus,
Yeah.
the pandemic, it's a sort of societal wall, and I think there's a lot of regression. I don't know about you, but I've experienced my own regressions facing it.
Um. Yeah. Uh, what do you mean? Can you explain more?
Um, well, I'm just thinking about clients, but
Hmm.
I want to respect their privacy. But even myself, just I don't know. Like it's harder to get things done. It's harder to I feel more like a child wanting to be dependent on mother.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
In the face of something that's very uncontrollable and that I very powerless in the face of, right?
Of course, and it's invisible above all. It's
It's
not like a
invisible
man
too.
running
Yeah.
in the street with a machine gun, where you can hide, you can see the threat when it's coming. Um, yeah, I mean, in the face of fear, and again, fear is healthy in this way,
Mm.
a bit of fear. So uh, imagine if there was no fear in in the world, then no one would be staying at home. And I'm not arguing here whether we should be staying at home or not, because
No.
there are different opinions there. Uh, but if we are not careful, then what will happen? Um, And this is one of the ways where, again, fear, just like anger, shame, guilt, all of that, they can be good or bad. Like it just depends on where um, where you are. And yes, in such situations, which is highly stressful for most people, uh, you hit a huge wall. So people who have been trying to please others all their life, they are hitting a wall. People who care a lot about money maybe are hitting a wall right now with stock markets and stuff like that. Uh, people who um, can't just sit in silence, or they have to be socializing all the time. Uh, they need connection with people all the time. They are hitting a wall now. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a weird time because it's global. There's a lot of unknown. We have no idea what's going to happen. All these projections and stuff like that are basically BS. They are just projections. Uh, and there could be multiple waves and things like that. So it's uh, um, it's the perfect wall in a sense
Mm.
on a societal scale.
No, I
Yeah,
think you're right about that.
yeah. The good thing about walls, though, yes, there is regression by them, but there also can be um, a lot of growth
Yeah,
from them as well.
agreed.
So yeah,
There's a bit of a pruning that happens, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
It's painful.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can also argue some of the things that were happening in society um, were not healthy at all. So um,
Right.
and healthy, I don't mean like health perspective, but like just on a consciousness level, or just values wise and things like that. So we will
No,
see
that's
what happens. No one knows.
no one knows. That's right.
It's good. We will see where that goes. I enjoyed this. It's good.
Yeah, no, I did too. It was great.
It's amazing how much we covered.
I know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Quite a bit.
Okay, well, see you later.
Yes, have a good Sunday.
You too.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.